Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Monty if you're new here, and today is going to be my March reading wrap up. I have 3 books to discuss with you. I have been very consistent with reading exactly 3 books every single month so far in 2026. It's just been the pace that's working for me, but I do think I'm on track to read a little bit more in April, so stay tuned for that. I'm gonna jump right in. The first book that I read in March was Game Changer by Reid. This is the first installment in the hockey romance series that inspired the show Heated Rivalry. And before I even get into the book, I do have to talk about the show for a second, because there is no world in which I would have picked this book up had I not watched the show first. Heated Rivalry rocked my world. I watched the entire thing over a weekend alone, became completely and utterly obsessed with it, and then immediately rewatched it with my fiance, who also loved it. If you haven't watched it and you aren't opposed to spice, I highly recommend that you do so. Just give it until episode 3 before you decide how you feel about it, because there is some setup that you have to get through before you feel invested in the characters and storylines. That's how it was for me, at least. Now that we've established my deep love of the show, the first book, Game Changer, centers Scott and Kip, who are side characters in the show. There's only one episode, episode 3, that is entirely dedicated to their relationship. And in my opinion, it is one of the best episodes. So I was really excited to get almost 400 pages of just their story. Scott is a closeted gay professional hockey player, and Kip is his openly gay barista at a smoothie shop. They strike up a romance that they then have to keep a secret because of how it might impact Scott's career. And as you can imagine, this starts to weigh heavily on their relationship. I'm just gonna say it like it is. The book is bad. Okay, the book is objectively bad. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. And the audiobook, even worse. The accent that the narrator gave Kip is an abomination. Like, I was truly dumbfounded when I heard it for the first time. It almost feels like the book was a disservice to the show, which is a crazy thing to say, I know, because the book is the blueprint, right? Like, the show wouldn't exist if it weren't for the book. And for that, I am grateful, but I just need to be honest about how I felt about this. I didn't like the writing. I thought it was very bland, and the pacing was just totally off. It was simultaneously too fast and too slow. The beginning, where the relationship is forming, happens way too quickly. It's very insta-lovey, and we miss out on all of that yearning and tension that is done so well in the show. And then once they do get together, which happens very early on, there's barely any development. There's very little plot progression. There's minimal to no relational growth between our 2 characters, and it essentially turns into a cycle of sex scenes and I love yous without much substance behind them. And that was especially frustrating because this is an almost 400-page book. There was so much real estate to work with to build a deeper emotional connection, and it just wasn't there. I do still plan on reading some other books in the series, specifically Heated Rivalry and The Long Way Home, because I've heard those are so much better, but Game Changer was a big miss for me. The second book that I read in March is Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. I am a huge fan of John Green and have been wanting to read his nonfiction for a while now, but I was also personally drawn to this because, fun fact, I have tuberculosis. I have latent tuberculosis. The only reason I know that is because I'm a healthcare provider, and periodically over the years, I've had to get tested for TB, and in 2022, I tested positive. My chest x-ray was clear, which meant that the TB wasn't active, but in order to prevent it from becoming active, I did have to undergo a round of antibiotic treatment for 9 months, and then after that, I was good. One thing about me is that I love a good, accessible nonfiction book, a book that can reach the masses and make complex topics feel understandable. And John Green is the king of that. He is such an amazing educator and communicator, and he has this way of making anything he talks about seem interesting. And I think this book is a perfect example of that, because how many people would have cared on their own to learn about tuberculosis? I'm assuming not many, but because of John Green and the platform that he's built, he made people care. This book covers so much in so few pages. He goes into the history of tuberculosis and how our understanding of it has evolved over time and how it continues to impact people to this day. He talks about why tuberculosis disproportionately affects certain communities due to socioeconomic differences and the privilege that so many people hold in not knowing that TB is still a major global health issue. On top of that, he highlights how monopoly power and corporate greed directly contribute to over 1 million deaths every single year from a disease that is curable, a disease that does not need to take another life, but continues to do so because of how unnecessarily difficult it is for people to properly receive diagnosis and treatment. The book is packed with information, but it also tells the story of a teenage boy named Henry living in Sierra Leone who is afflicted with TB, someone who John Green has personally invested a lot of time and energy into. And it's Henry's story that grounds everything else into something that is very human. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. There were some parts that moved slower for me than others, and it took me longer to get through than I expected, given that it's under 200 pages. But I overall really enjoyed this, and I think it's an important book that most people would benefit from reading. The final book that I read in March is the very controversial Half His Age by Jennette McCurdy. You know, from time to time, there will be a book that is seemingly beloved by all that I don't like. Rarely, though, does the opposite happen, where I really like a book that is widely disliked, but that is what has happened here. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I had a good experience reading this. However, I completely understand why so many people didn't. I think for me, I knew from other people's reviews what I was getting myself into. I knew that this was going to be disturbing. I knew that it was going to be explicit and vulgar and gross, and I was ready for that. I was prepared for that type of reading experience, and I think having the right expectations set me up for success with this story. So this is about a 17-year-old girl named Waldo who becomes infatuated with her 40-year-old married English teacher, and she initiates a relationship with him. We are reading from the perspective of Waldo, so we're inside of her head, we're hearing all of her thoughts regarding this relationship, but we're also getting a lot of background information on her, what her home life looks like, what her mental health struggles are, what insecurities she has, and all of that gives us a lot of insight into maybe how this teacher-student grooming situation came about. And I personally thought that the topic was handled with a lot of nuance. I think that what's throwing so many people off with this book is that it doesn't portray grooming in the typical way that we would expect. Waldo is a tough pill to swallow. She's an unlikable character, and I would go as far to say that she doesn't demonstrate a single redeemable quality throughout the entire story. And I think her being so unlikable forces readers to confront their own assumptions about what a victim should look like. Waldo's character shows that victims come in all forms, and that being unlikable doesn't make someone less susceptible to harm. Despite our personal feelings on Waldo, we should still be able to recognize that she's being abused in this situation, even if she's the one that instigated the whole thing. And on that note, I think it is such an interesting choice by Jennette McCurdy to make Waldo the pursuer, because again, I think she's trying to make a point that even if a minor consents or agrees, or in this case, initiates a sexual or romantic relationship with an adult, it is still the adult's responsibility as the person in a position of power, as the person with twice as much life experience, to set and maintain boundaries. That is not up for discussion. So was this a perfect book in my eyes? No, it certainly had its flaws, and in particular, I think that the ending left a lot to be desired, but you can't deny that this has sparked a lot of conversation around the internet, and I think that's exactly what Jennette McCurdy set out to do. Given the content of this book, I'm not gonna broadly recommend it. If you do decide to pick it up, I would say go into it with caution, but stay open to potentially having an experience like I did. Those are the books that I read in March. We are now almost halfway through April, so I'm gonna tell you what I've read thus far, what I'm currently reading, and what I'm hoping to get to in the second half of the month, so you know what to expect with my April reading wrap up. The only thing that I have read start to finish is The Yellow Wallpaper, which is a classic short story that everyone recommends. Because it's so short, I'm gonna save my thoughts on it for a later video, but I did read this. And then I was reflecting on my 2026 goals, and I realized that I have made absolutely no progress towards 2 of them, and I only had 3 to begin with. So that's not great. I have not made a dent in any of the series that I'm in the middle of, and I also haven't read a single classic. So April is the month that I start chipping away at those goals. I'm currently in the middle of the second book in the Millennium trilogy, The Girl Who Played with Fire. I read The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo a couple of years ago and I really liked it, but I do remember that it took almost 200 pages before I felt invested in the mystery, whereas with this one, I was hooked from the first page. I am so thoroughly enjoying my time with this. Once I get done editing this video, I will be devoting all of my free time to reading this book, and I'm so thrilled about it. The classic that I will 100% be starting and hopefully finishing in April is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I just have the itch. I have the itch to pick this up. I don't even know what it's about, but it's calling my name. And I kind of want to capture my experience with this and do a reading vlog, but I haven't done a vlog in such a long time that I'm a little nervous about it. But if anyone voices interest in that in the comments, I will make it a priority. And then let me give you a quick rundown of the books I have on hold through Libby. So I have Artificial Condition by Martha Wells, which is the second novella in the Murderbot Diaries. I have a lot of confidence that I'll get to this in April because it's short and it'll help me with my series goal. The second book that I have is The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. If you haven't heard about this, I don't know what rock you've been living under because this book has been everywhere. I love letters, I love mixed media, and I just have a really good feeling that I'm gonna love this book. And lastly, I have been craving a really good romance, and Cara Bastone did me right last year with Ready or Not. So I've been patiently waiting to read Promise Me Sunshine by her. I just got access to it through the library, and with the weather warming up, it seems like perfect timing. So this is a strong, strong contender for April. Now that the sun has set, as it always does in my videos because I can never seem to film at the proper time, I will bid you adieu. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.